The alien admiral sat comfortably in the command chamber of the grand flagship Celestial Spear, his mandibles clicking in amusement. Before him, the holographic display projected a view of a pathetic ragtag fleet approaching the Empire's border. They called it the Pequeña Flota, a name that seemed as unimpressive as the fleet itself. A small, unorganized cluster of ships drifting silently in the void. It was laughable. Is this the best they can muster? Admiral Isaac sneered, his multifaceted eyes scanning the sensor data. A joke, even for humans. Around him, his officers chittered in agreement, their disdain for the upstart species almost palpable. Humanity was a new player in the galaxy, their technology primitive, their culture disorganized. The notion that they could challenge the might of the Vorynn Imperium was preposterous. The admiral gestured to the tactical officer. What do our scans show? The officer hesitated, her talons tapping the control panel nervously. Minimal energy output. No significant weapons detected. The hull structures are irregular, almost biological in nature. It's difficult to analyze, Admiral. Isaac leaned forward, his amusement fading slightly. Difficult? You're telling me our advanced sensors can't fully scan those? His tone was sharp, his pride as an officer of the Imperium wounded. It's as if they've deliberately designed these vessels to evade conventional detection methods, the officer replied, struggling to explain. There's also an anomaly in their movement patterns. Precise but erratic, unlike anything we've encountered. Primitive trickery, Doeg scoffed. They think they can outwit us with scraps and shadows. Send a broadcast. Let them know they face the full wrath of the Imperium. A communications officer sent out a standard warning. Surrender or face annihilation. No response came from the fleet. Instead, it continued its steady approach, undeterred. Doeg leaned back, a smirk returning to his features. Prepare the plasma arrays. Let's put an end to this farce. Moments later, the fleet sent a response, a single encrypted message that took the Vorynn technicians several minutes to decode. When they finally succeeded, the admiral's smirk disappeared entirely. We are not what you think. The words hung in the air, a simple yet unsettling statement. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence now tinged with doubt. More of their theatrics, Isaac said dismissively, though his voice lacked conviction. Target the largest vessel and fire at will. The order was carried out instantly. A volley of plasma fire streaked through the void, aimed squarely at the heart of the Pequeña Flota. The alien officers watched, expecting to see a cascade of destruction. But when the light cleared, the fleet was unharmed. What? Stood, his mandibles twitching in disbelief. How did they? No damage registered, the tactical officer reported, her voice trembling. They absorbed the energy. Absorbed it. Before the admiral could demand answers, the fleet began to move. It was a calculated, synchronized advance that defied logic. The tiny, insignificant ships that had been the butt of their jokes now felt like predators closing in. The Pequeña Flota moved as one, its seemingly frail ships now an undeniable force of precision and purpose. The Vorynn fleet shifted into full combat readiness, their arrogance giving way to genuine unease. The air in the flagship was tense, the confident swagger of Isaac's officers replaced by hurried calculations and whispered doubts. Prepare all weapon systems, barked, his voice cutting through the murmurs. They may be unconventional, but they are not invincible. The first wave of plasma fire erupted from the Vorynn fleet, a cascade of energy designed to overwhelm and obliterate. Yet, as before, the human ships absorbed the energy, their surfaces glowing faintly as if drinking in the attack. Then, with no warning, they struck back. Beams of concentrated light sliced through the void, not targeting ships but their energy cores and communication arrays. The precision was surgical, each strike rendering the Vorynn vessels helpless without delivering a killing blow. The humans weren't destroying their enemies, they were dismantling them. On board the flagship, the admiral gripped the edges of his console, his claws digging into the polished surface. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "It's impossible to predict their movements," the tactical officer replied, sweat glistening on her carapace. "Every time we adjust, they adapt instantly. It's as if," she hesitated, unsure how to articulate it, "as if they're anticipating our actions. They're exploiting our weakness," Essex snarled, refusing to believe it. "Increase the power to the plasma arrays. Overload their systems." But no amount of power could disrupt what the humans had become. The fleet's movements became more aggressive, their strategy evolving in real time. It was as if each ship was not just a vessel but a living entity, one that learned and grew stronger with every encounter. Then the turning point came. One of the smaller Vorynn frigates managed to land a direct hit on a human ship, tearing through its hull. Cheers erupted briefly on the command deck, but they were short-lived. The damaged ship didn't fall back or disintegrate. Instead, its exposed interior writhed with movement, regenerating at an unnatural pace. "Admiral," the science officer whispered, her voice filled with dread. "The ship, it's healing itself." As they watched, the human ship's structure knitted itself back together, its glowing veins pulsing with renewed energy. The strike that should have been a victory only reinforced the horrifying reality. The fleet was alive, and it was relentless. The humans retaliated with precision, disabling the frigate and leaving it adrift. Then came the message, broadcast across all frequencies. It was a voice. No, many voices, speaking in perfect unison. "We have evolved beyond your understanding. We are not bound by machines. We are the machines." The words reverberated through the Vorynn fleet, their meaning as unsettling as their tone. These were not mere humans piloting ships. They were the ships, living, thinking constructs born of desperation and ingenuity. Panic spread through the Vorynn ranks as more ships fell to the human fleet's relentless assault. Crews abandoned their posts, fleeing in escape pods as their vessels were rendered powerless. The once mighty armada of the Imperium was crumbling, piece by piece, at the hands of the smallest fleet they had ever encountered. On the flagship, Esex's defiance began to waver. His empire's might, its pride, was being systematically dismantled by creatures he had dismissed as weak and insignificant. He slammed his fist against the console, his mandibles trembling with rage and fear. "This isn't over," he growled, though deep down he knew the truth. The Pequeña Flota was unstoppable, not because of its strength, but because of what it represented. A species that had turned desperation into innovation, weakness into an unyielding force.